Okay, so we are live. Let's say I'm setting up my webinar. Okay, now we are streaming live on Facebook. So we've got several people in the room with us in the Zoom room, and then also we are streaming live on Facebook. So I think we should go ahead and get started. Just one second. Okay. And I just want to thank everyone. As people come in, I want to let you know that this community conversation that we're having tonight on special education will be recorded both on Facebook. It'll live as a video on Facebook. It's also being recorded locally, and I will upload it to our district Vimeo account and send out a link, because I know there were some parents, I tried to answer as many as I could, but there were some parents who couldn't make it with us tonight but wanted to be sure that they would be able to go back and reference it later when they wanted to watch it, and that will happen. My name is Carrie Birmingham. I'm the Director of Communications for the Troy School District, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I know that everybody's lives are busy and chaotic right now, so I really appreciate those of you who joined us on the Zoom and also are tuning in on Facebook. I'm going to introduce the folks who are here with us now, who are going to answer some of your questions and who are here for support. Of course, first is Dr. Rich Macheski, our Superintendent of Schools in the Troy School District. We also have Jessica Carrier. She is our Director of Special Education, and she will be answering a lot of questions today. Sarah Young, she is our Supervisor, our Elementary Special Education Supervisor, and Christine Foran, who is our Secondary Special Education Supervisor. I also want to thank Dr. Nicole Wilson of the Troy Board of Education Trustee for being here to support and to help us listen through this conversation as well. What I'm going to do, we have a lot of questions that we got through, and I appreciate people submitting those questions in advance, because it really allows us to kind of group them together and keep the conversation flowing, so that if you had a question that was a follow-up to something someone else asked or very similar, we can put those kind of back to back so that we know that the conversation will make sense going forward. But Dr. Macheski, I want to start with you, because I think perhaps we need kind of a general overview of where we are and kind of what our intentions are going forward. We got a fair number of questions from parents about the possibility for in-person learning as soon as possible. We heard from parents who had students in an ASD room who could not participate in virtual learning without a lot of difficulty. We heard from others that wanted to know when that 5-week review is up, might we consider bringing some students back with significant special needs? Can you just kind of characterize for our families where we are and what our goals are at this point?
Sure, Carrie, thank you. And I want to first thank everyone for being on the call. And for those that are tuning in, we recognized that this is an important topic as we fielded questions over the course of the last several weeks. This is a great format for us to gather input from our community in terms of questions, because it's those questions when we put them together that really give us a feel for where the concerns are amongst our community. And so it was very important as we discussed our return to learn plan with our Board of Education, when we discussed it as district leaders in our work groups, and then as we discussed it and rolled it out for our Board of Education, one of the consistent questions kept coming back: how can we support is it possible for us to find ways to support our exceptional learners, those students that have needs that really they struggle to meet those needs in a full virtual format. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been thinking about how we do that over the course of the last several weeks. And it is my expectation, and I believe I said this in our last community conversation, is my expectation and goal, working with staff, to provide opportunities that would allow us to meet our students' individual needs, whether in small group, whether it be in one-on-one settings, as we start the school year. And so it is absolutely our goal to find ways to meet those students' needs. recognizing that, again, not everyone is going to learn, is going to be able to learn in this virtual format. I think it's also important for the community to understand that Carrie and I, for instance, we both have children that have IEPs. We've been on that other side of the meeting, if you will, and we recognize fully just how important it is for our parents to have clear understanding as to what their students should expect, and that's been front and center in our thinking as we have worked together with Jessica Carrier and her team to make that happen. So know that we understand, and we're working diligently to make sure that we're going to meet the needs of our students as best we can. There are also quite a bit of, you're going to hear tonight, there's quite a bit that goes into this decision making. It's not as simple as just saying, hey, let's do this. We have to be able to do it in a manner that promotes the safety of both our students, their families, and our teachers and their families. And we're committed to doing that moving forward. And so that's how I would answer that question. And I know there's also potential questions around what about some of our services that we provide, OT, for instance, PT services. And we're committed to working with those third-party providers that we have in the past, and making sure that we can offer that we are able to offer those services as families have received those in the past. It may look a little different. All of this, unfortunately, is looking different, and we have to be flexible and be patient with respect to that. But it is our commitment to continue to work with those providers as well to offer our families that service that they so need.
I think that will relieve a lot of people, and I think that's really, important for people to hear. I think for a lot of people, it's the uncertainty, it's the unknowns that I think are difficult. Now, I am confident I can say this because I have seen the amount of work that's been done in our teaching and learning department and our special education department. I'm confident that virtual learning will look different in the fall than it looked in the spring. But parents don't see that necessarily. They don't know all the work that goes on in the background. And what they want to know is, what will their child's day look like? So Jessica Carrier, can you give us some insight into what a student day will look like and how those supports will work through the day when we are in a virtual setting?
Thanks, Carrie. I know that's a question that's heavy on all of our parents' minds, and I fully understand that as a parent myself. But thinking through this, it has been a tricky. It's been a tricky schedule building as we try to think about our kids individually. And we've spent a great deal of time thinking through what that looks like for kids that are speech only, that are social work, kids that have multiple services, plus maybe some specialized instruction classes, or just kiddos that are in our categorical, and keeping in mind that it's really important for us to also have them in with their general education peers. So Sarah and Christine have both put together some sample schedules that we want to kind of pull you through as we look at scheduling birth through 26. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind taking us through those first three schedules.
Sure, I am going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. The parents that I've spoken to, oh, you know what, Carrie, it says that it's disabled.
All right, let me fix that setting for you right now.
I've spoken with many of a few parents, a handful of parents in the last couple of days, and I know this is a question that you're continuing to ask, so I hope that this is helpful for you.
Hang on, I'm just going to change the setting to allow the panelists to share their screens as well. And I apologize, this is normally set that way for panelists, but I believe someone else was using this account. There you go. Okay, I apologize for that. We've now reset it. So Sarah, can you go ahead and try to share your screen again?
Yeah, I sure can. It still says the same thing.
I've got it so participants can share now, and that doesn't seem to be working. Okay. Why don't you, as you're starting to talk, if you want, you can also send it to me and I can share it. But,
I can do that.
it says right here that sharing, let's see.
Okay, I just sent it to you.
Okay,
Should get a link in just a second.
sure. Yep, I've got it.
Okay,
And
So
I
the-
apologize for the delay on that, but I will get that up there for you.
thank you. And if you want to, Carrie, please go to the second slide on there. That will be the first one that I'm going to talk about, which is our preschool. So our youngest learners, so our early childhood special education program, our students who are getting ready for kindergarten. And that program runs in half-day sessions. And so typically they are 3 hours each in the morning and in the afternoon. What you'll see here on the schedule is similar to the rest of the district, is that there is some reduced time and the amount of hours that the student is going to be engaging. We have also tried to be similar and consistent with the rest of the district when thinking about the schedule. I know, oh, there you go. I was gonna say, I know you can't see Friday there, but now you can. So in the past, for parents who either have had students attend ECP or have students who will be in the early childhood special education preschool for the fall, what you can remember is that Friday used to be a day that was dedicated to things such as community outings for our families. That was the day that our teachers held their IEP meetings or had planning time. What we have adjusted in thinking about the fall is making that Wednesday to be consistent with the rest of the district when we transition to a hybrid model. So Wednesday will now be dedicated to all of those things. You can see that there's consistency as well in what the schedule looks like in the morning and the afternoon. So both groups will have the same, relatively the same schedule. This is also just a reminder that this is a sample, but this is what we're hoping the days may look like for our youngest students. And so they'll start with a welcome meeting, and then they'll have some small group instruction with their teacher. And that could potentially look like, what we know is that our paras will be coming back. And so each one of our classroom teachers has 2 para educators. And so this small group instruction could be the teacher facilitating a group in a Zoom session, and then having 2 breakout rooms for each para to be running a group as well. We've got some built-in brain breaks and potty breaks there, as well as speech, social work, and OT-PT. So those ancillary service providers really work collaboratively to serve these students. And then you'll see that there's another small group instruction at the end of the day, followed by a goodbye routine. So that is an example of what the preschool schedule looked like. And this is only for, just to clarify, this is only for our ECP preschool students. And then if we move on to the next slide, what you'll see is, I believe, yes, so this is a sample schedule for.
I went one too far, sorry.
Yep, that's okay. So when thinking about our categorical students, so our students with some more complex needs, we tried to balance having them spend some time still with their gen ed classrooms and their peers, because that's a really important part of their day, in addition to making sure that they're getting that more intensive support from the categorical teacher. And so this is a sample weekly schedule of what it might look like for a 2nd grade student who's in a categorical program, such as an ASD program, a program for students with cognitive impairments, and is also receiving those ancillary services, so speech, social work, and occupational therapy. And so what we did when we went through this is took the gen ed schedule that is going to be implemented for the rest of the district and tweaked it to meet the needs of our students. So that 8:30 to 8:45 time right now is a time that the student, that is this time for gen ed also in second grade to be running a morning meeting, and that's a really important time for them to be building those relationships and establishing those routines and just checking in, for the student to be with their peers. However, we do also know that for some of our categorical students, being in a Zoom meeting with 20 other faces on the screen may be overwhelming for them. And so if that's too much for them, they could potentially be starting their day with their categorical teacher in a morning meeting. This particular student here for this sample is attending Reader's Workshop with their gen ed classroom. You'll see on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday that they're attending that entire Reader's Workshop time. And on Wednesday and Thursday, they have some categorical literacy time built in. The brain breaks for the categorical students are a little bit longer than what they are built into the general education schedule, and that was very intentional. And then what you'll see is that we have time built in the morning and in the afternoon after lunch for categorical literacy centers and then categorical math centers. And so that could look similar to what I spoke to for the early childhood preschool program, the special education ECP program, where you have the teacher who's facilitating more intensive instruction, maybe one-on-one with a student or in a small group, and then the paras who are also facilitating a center in a breakout room. So what we also took into consideration here was that science for some students, some of our students, ends up being a really high interest area for them, and so we didn't want to pull them, and an opportunity for some socialization. And so what we didn't want to do is pull them from that time with their peers, and so we left that time in the schedule. You can also see that they have the time built in for their outside service, or not their outside services, I'm sorry, their ancillary services, such as speech, OT, and social work. For the schedules, I mean, the special schedule is slightly confusing, but if they are in Class A, if their class is designated a Class A, they would attend their specials from 1:40 to 2:10. And Class B, and so on. We know that for some of our students in our categorical classrooms, they may not attend a particular special, but they may attend others if it's a high interest area to them. And so really tailoring their schedule to meet their needs. And then, so that would take care of the categorical student. And then if we go to the next slide, this could be a sample schedule for a third grade elementary school student who requires resource room support for reading, writing, and math, as well as gets direct speech service and social work service. And so you will see that they are following the gen ed schedule. What we've really tried to do is keep them in tier 1 with their gen ed peers for all of the core content areas. The teaching and learning department and other departments, the ELD department and literacy department and special ed have all been working really hard to try and create schedules that are have some built-in intervention time to avoid students having to miss that tier 1 time, which we know is so important. So similar to the categorical schedule, the morning meeting is with their gen ed peers. Their entire day really is, with the exception of those times where they may be receiving intervention. So for Writer's Workshop, you can see they're with their gen ed peers, but then they may be pushed for the actual lesson. But then this particular student is being pushed out into a breakout room with resource room support for the actual writing portion of that time. They have a few brain breaks worked into their day. They go to Reader's Workshop with their gen ed classrooms, and then for math, they have a chunk of time that they're actually getting the instruction from the gen ed teacher, and then they have resource room support built in. And then they have that 40-minute reading intervention block that happens after lunch. And the same, that would be the same for the schedules, depending on which class that they're assigned to. So something else just to mention here that we talked about, but didn't create an exact schedule for, in looking at this schedule, all of the times that are here that have like our reading intervention is resource room reading intervention time. That is a time that's specified for an intervention. So that could potentially, if you have a child who is has an IEP for only speech intervention, could potentially be, they would still be in all of those the gen ed content areas throughout their day, but then one of these intervention times may be dedicated to the speech service. So I think that wraps it up for the elementary level. Christine is going to take it from here and talk to you about the secondary schedules.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Carrie, and you already got it. Perfect. Good evening, everyone. We appreciate you being here. And I also want to echo what Sarah said. I was able to engage in quite a few conversations with parents and actually a couple students this week. So that was really exciting for me to get on the phone with a couple students and them share their favorite summer moment or what they're looking forward to. A lot of them said that they can't wait to see their friends, even if it is on a computer. They just can't wait to see their friends. So the first sample I'd like to share with you is secondary schedule for a student receiving resource room support. This one is at the high school schedule, but as mentioned in previous community conversations, all secondary buildings, both middle school and high school, will be following the same bell schedule. So students will attend classes on that rotating A-B schedule, and then students will be attending hours 1st, 2nd, and 3rd on A days, and then 4th, 5th, and 6th on B days. There is, during those days, there's 95-minute blocks, but there's 25 minutes in between each one of those sections. The other feature that the schedule has is that there's 45 minutes incorporated into every student's schedule at the end of the day for those additional supports, as well as being able to access any interventions if they are needed. During those afternoon intervention times, possible activities could include conferencing or seeking assistance from either a special education teacher or a general education teacher. It can also be meeting with service providers if you are pulled for either small group or individual services with OT, PT, speech, social work. And then the other thing that could also be designated during that time is receiving accommodations from our middle school testing centers, as well as our high school academic support centers. The next schedule, thank you, Carrie. The next sample schedule is for a student that would be receiving programming in one of our categorical programs. You'll see that it does follow the same schedule, just like all secondary buildings, but it does have those specialized instruction classes noted. And one thing to be mindful of during that time is that those structure in those classes is really going to be student-centered, and there's going to be instruction that can be whole group, very similar to what Sarah was talking about, that maybe it's that morning meeting, that group community buildings, so all students can engage, and then also small group rotating centers, and in some cases some individual or small group instruction provided by paras and special education teachers while utilizing those Zoom breakout rooms. Teachers will be collaborating with their families regarding what these courses will look like to ensure engagement and then active participation for our students. They also have the embedded support time to get additional assistance from their general education classes if they're in elective classes or general education classes, as well as their ancillary services to meet those individual needs. The last schedule I have to share with you is for Troy Center for Transition. This would be a sample schedule for a student that would be participating in our Tier 3 program. So that would be, their day would start with a morning meeting. Learning targets could include socialization, reading social cues, engagement, comprehension, listening skills, as well as current events. And then obviously communication is a big piece for our students. So we want to make sure that they're using both verbal communication, and then also if the students use an AAC device, we want to make sure that they would be able to use that. And then, for example, communicating through an iPad, because we really want to make sure that they're having those reciprocal communications if they're able to. The schedule features also include designated times for speech, social work, daily living skills, functional, academics, vocational, and cooking skills. One thing that if you're a parent of a TCT student, you would know that one of the things that our students at the building really look forward to is Friday outings. And so the TCT staff has been working tirelessly to develop fun virtual alternatives for our students until we are able to resume those experiences.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. All right, I was going to say we should be back on. So I apologize, and I just want to let people know as well. You know, it took us a minute with the screen sharing there. We're committed to staying online to get all of your questions answered. So please don't think that that's going to take away from your time and your questions. I also want to point out to our folks that are watching us on Facebook, this is, if you missed the very beginning of this is our community conversation regarding special education. So some of the questions that are being asked and some of the comments that are coming up are regard to the district in general. So just to let you know, this is specific to special education, and we won't be able to, we've got several hundred people watching on Facebook as well as joining us here in Zoom. So it's not something that we will be able to answer those questions live on Facebook while we're doing this as well. As I said in the very beginning though, this is recorded. This will live on Facebook as a video, and it's also being recorded locally and will be updated or uploaded to our Vimeo account, and I will send out a link to parents if they missed a part of that, because that was a lot of really good information there that I know that folks are going to want to know. And I think that being able to picture those days, I think is going to help, you know, a lot of people going forward, because I think it's, when you can see it, it makes a lot more sense than it does when you're just hearing things. So let's go now to some of our questions we got were around the idea of contingency learning plans. And as a parent of two children actually with IEPs through school, I'm not familiar with contingency learning plans. And I think there's some confusion out there because I don't think it's something that a lot of people are familiar. So Jessica, can you walk us through what a contingency learning plan is and what it does? Oh, Jess, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
We do recognize that, or in terms of the contingency learning plan, it really is in response to the pandemic. We recognize that this is certainly not a place that any of us want to be in right now, and we can all agree that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was not written for the pandemic, and it's important that we do get a plan in place, because what we have with the IEP, when we are in a pandemic, we have to kind of pivot, and this, I guess, would be called our pivot plan. So we are currently making sure that we have our staff trained up on how to write a contingency learning plan and to make sure that it's as meaningful for students while we're in this health crisis.
Mm-hmm. And so that essentially provides those supports and talks about what those supports are going to look like when we're in this kind of unprecedented, crazy situation. If a parent, is a parent involved in that process? Let me ask you that first. And if a parent is opposed to the developing of a contingency learning plan, will one still be developed and added to an IEP?
Yeah, so We always want our parents involved. And so in the development of our contingency learning plans, yes, a parent is involved because you actually have a lot of the data that we need in terms of developing the contingency learning plan. You were at home with your child during the remote learning. You have all of that information that we need to be able to build a meaningful plan. So my hope would be that you wouldn't refuse to do a contingency learning plan, because it really is there to help our staff and our students and you, and make sure that we're supporting supporting our students the best we can while we are while we're in this pandemic health crisis. So does that answer your question, Carrie?
It does, yeah. I guess for parents, what are the specific changes that will be introduced in a CLP as compared to an IEP that parents and students have rather when they're in-person classroom sessions?
Well, I think when we're thinking about developing the contingency learning plan, we're really thinking about the fact that we are not in a traditional school day. We aren't going to be able to, we're in a reduced setting. The setting's different. So we really have to take a look at our goals and how we can still work towards those goals in those new settings.
That makes sense. So what kind of time frame should parents expect being set up with a contingency learning plan and figuring out what that plan will look like?
We're really going to take a look at our kiddos that have the most needs at this time, and we're going to start working through building contingency plans for our students. There are some students, for instance, a child that just has speech and language, whose IEP really is not dependent. It's nice to have the face-to-face, but it's not as dependent on the environment as per se like a categorical student. So that's how we'll work through it. My hope is we'll get through developing of our contingency learning plans, contacting parents when we get back, and then September, mid-October.
Well, Sarah and Christine, maybe you can talk about this a little bit. So how will the school year start? Because obviously it's going to take a while to set up contingency learning plans for all students with IEPs. So how will that school year start if the case managers are still working on some of those plans, making them appropriate for a virtual setting? What will the school year look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of families are wondering that, because it does take some time for case managers and the buildings to get their schedules completely set in terms of who's delivering what intervention at what time. And so they'll be working with their teams to develop those schedules. But in the meantime, while they're doing so, what we have been recommending to our staff is that we recognize the emphasis that needs to be placed right now on building those relationships with their peers and with their gen ed teachers and with our other staff. And so what we have suggested is that they're really spending a lot of time pushing into those gen ed sessions while they're building their schedules, so that they can also build relationships with the students in that format at the elementary level. And then Christine can give you a little bit more information as to what that might look like for our secondary students.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the secondary level, our schedules are pretty much already established. If a student does have a specialized instruction class, it's already going to be on their schedule. So that's going to be their contact time with a resource room teacher. There are students at the secondary level that do not have a specialized instruction class with a resource room teacher. So in those cases, those teachers would be establishing check-in times, as well as utilizing that support/intervention time at the end of the 45 minutes at the end of the day to kind of build those relationships and really conference with the students, as well as what they have experienced from the spring, and then what we can do to kind of move forward and kind of put in some really good supports to continue that practice.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to stick with Christine and Sarah, because I've got several questions in a row regarding kind of student learning and those supports and accommodations that are in place. And Sarah, maybe we'll start with you. A parent writes that my child needs extra face time to clarify her academic assignment. She also needs to have a timely status check on some of her completed work to ensure that she's on the right track. How can that be accomplished in this setting?
Sure. When really we should she should bring that up to the primary case manager, and make sure that we are having those conversations, both for the special education intervention time, but as well for the gen ed teacher. And so making sure that the gen ed teacher is aware of that need with that child will be really helpful, so that they can work that into the contingency plan if necessary. And so really just working together as a team to make sure that that communication is there will be really important.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. That communication, I think, is key. Christine, then at the high school level, how will you accommodate kids who have those learning plans for them to have more time on tests, which is a pretty common accommodation? Will teachers know? I know that Sarah talked about at elementary, reaching out to the case manager and reaching out to the teachers. Do the students need to advocate for themselves? How will that work at the secondary level?
Yeah, absolutely. So accommodations are shared with all of the children's teachers. So they should be followed whether we're in a remote or in a hybrid setting if appropriate. With that being said, it's also possible that accommodations or additional accommodations may be necessary in the remote setting, and this could be done through that contingency learning plan that Jessica kind of touched on a little bit earlier. As far as, do students need to advocate? Yes, they don't need to advocate. Teachers already have access to the accommodations, but we do urge our students to be familiar with their IEP, especially at the secondary level, to establish those advocacy skills, so then they can live a more independent life. One thing that caseload teachers do is they can help support those students in those conversations, whether it's helping them draft a Schoology message to a teacher, or even popping into teachers' 45-minute intervention time in the afternoon with them to help facilitate that conversation.
I'm smiling, Christine, because that's one of the things we really worked on with one of my daughters as well. Jessica, maybe you can talk to me about how 504s are going to work. In this environment that we're in right now, how will a 504 work? Oops. You're muted, Jess. Sorry.
Oh, geez.
There you go.
You're supposed to be able to, just so we're all clear, you're supposed to be able to push your bar on and unmute yourself. So that trick did not work today. Sorry about that.
Zoom is having some fun with us with the webinar. It's different than a Zoom meeting. This is different than a Zoom meeting because we're trying to accommodate as many people as possible, just so everybody knows. So we've got, we can accommodate up to 1,000 people in this room. I think we've got a few hundred right now, and then several more on Facebook. So things are a little bit different in this environment. So go ahead, Jessica. 504.
All right. Well, thanks, Carrie. So the 504 plans, I know that that's weighing on parents' minds. Those also are distributed to our teachers on at the beginning of the school year, either by your principal if you're at the elementary, or your counselors are doing that at the middle school. And then at the high school, we have 504 coordinators that are making sure that those are getting into your teacher's hands. So whether we're in remote or hybrid, that is information that they will have and they should be aware of. But it is important that throughout the process and being in a remote setting, thinking through if there are things that you recognized didn't work for your child, or you feel like there's something more that's needed, that you contact those individuals so that you can get back to the table and start talking about, how you need to revise that 504.
Okay. Sarah, I think I'm going to turn to you for this one. We had a number of questions on this in this general topic about how we can support students in virtual instruction that have IEPs for things like staying on task, increasing engagement, and decreasing some of the challenging behaviors that students can have while in a Zoom. How will we support students in that way?
Yeah, we have been working really hard with and brainstorming with our behavior support coordinator and our school social workers, a few of them over the summer, to develop some behavior supports that could be implemented in the virtual setting. As well as we do know that trauma can provoke some challenging behaviors. And so the SEL, the team that has been working, that Jessica has been leading, the SEL work, will lead to helping with this as well. But we're putting some things in place, such as the trauma training for gen ed teachers, which will give them some information about how to support students who have went through trauma that could be potentially having challenging behavior in their sessions, as well as how our behavior support team and social workers can really dig into supporting behavior in the virtual world. We've done things like provided some visual supports to our principals and special education teachers already that Erica Conklin has worked on. She's our behavior support coordinator. She also has a behavior support page, sway page, that will be sent out to parents that has some resources, some of the exact same resources actually, but some of those resources include things like hand washing and social distancing and appropriate Zoom behavior, those kinds of things that we'd never had to teach before that now we're having to explicitly teach now. Another thing that the behavior support team has really been trying to develop is what will their structure look like for this upcoming fall when we're in a virtual setting. And so we've been having some conversations about and planning for a more robust support system in terms of even potentially Erica or one of our behavior support technicians doing some direct observation of the student in one of the Zoom sessions with their camera off, being able to provide some follow-up consultation to the parent or the caregiver or the teachers, having some time to brainstorm what might work, what could we tweak, could we put a reinforcement strategy in place for this student while they're in the virtual world. And another step that that team is working on is looking at how can we provide some direct coaching to the caregiver, the parent, or the teacher actually during those instructional sessions. And so possibly being there with their camera off and using the private chat feature to let the parent know when they should be providing a token to the student while they're at home. Those kinds of things that we're really just trying to think outside of the box into how can we implement some more intensive behavior supports to get our students who struggle with challenging behavior and engagement to try and get them to engage.
Well, it sounds like some excellent brainstorming going on. And just for the folks who are just joining us, because I can see people joining us on both Facebook and Zoom, this is our community conversation on special education issues. We've got a great panel here to answer all of your questions. If you missed the very beginning, Dr. Macheski talked about our goals to have students back in the classroom as quickly as possible, and our goals also to support our students with our significant needs and helping to bring them back as well. But Sarah, I'm going to go on to the next question because there is some part of this where we are in a virtual setting. And how will students in self-contained programs be supported, both special ed supports and in their general ed when they push into their general ed classrooms? How will they be supported?
So they'll continue to be supported by their classroom teacher if they need that additional support, so the gen ed teacher, but then also the categorical program teacher or one of the support staff. If they're pushing into, as you saw in the sample schedule for the second grade categorical student with categorical needs earlier, that student was going to Reader's Workshop, and within that schedule it actually showed that he or she was going to Reader's Workshop with a para, and so they were there with support, being able to get pushed into a breakout room when appropriate, and that support could be provided by a para, could be provided by the teacher if appropriate. And also going back to the previous question, just talking about what are those supports and coaching strategies that we could put in place to really help whoever is supporting the student via Zoom.
I've got a couple of questions as well, and Christine, I think I'll toss this one to you regarding and to be honest, we got several of these questions in our general education community conversation as well, but this is from a parent of a student with who's receiving special education services. Will we be able to print the assignments in the event that we need to do work away from the iPad? Several people said my son works well with physical books. They hard copies of things are more helpful for students. Will those sorts of things be provided?
Yeah, absolutely. So with our learning management system, Schoology, there is going to be an opportunity, and schoolwork should be available to be printed if needed. If you don't have access to a printer and you need hard copies for your student to work, please let your caseload teacher know as soon as possible, because they would like to help support that need. We also understand that there's some students that actually really need that physical text in front of them. If the class does use a physical text, we will be happy to provide that textbook for them. But then there's also some courses at the secondary level that they don't have a textbook, and they post resources to the Schoology page. So once again, we would make sure that we would be working with the families to help facilitate whether it's being mailed home or being available to get picked up. But please reach out to your caseload teacher if you do have that specific need.
Okay, and I'm going to go on to another question for you, Christine, but I do want to reiterate, and I don't know if this would be best for Jess or someone else. We've talked several times about caseload managers or your caseload teacher, and I'm getting a few questions on Facebook. What do you do if you don't know who your child's caseload manager or teacher is? How does a parent find out that information?
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, do you want to take that one, or you want me to?
It doesn't matter. If you don't know who your caseload manager is, you certainly can reach out to Sarah, Christine, or myself. Your building principal, typically the caseload manager, unless you're in a transition year, is the district representative that's listed on your IEP. So that would be the first person that I would contact if you're looking for who your primary case manager is.
Okay, but you guys are available. Someone could reach out to you via email if they were struggling to find out who that person was. Christine at secondary, Sarah at elementary, and you'd help connect them with whoever that person is. Excellent. Yes. Okay, Christine, this is a question we got several times as well, and I can appreciate some of this. We got from parents, I am concerned that my child will not be able to sit and focus for 90 minutes. Can you talk about what that time will look like? Because I think across the district, sometimes parents hear 90 minutes and they think that's 90 minutes of sitting and listening to instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think that this is not just a student addressing students with special needs conversation, because I think there's probably a lot of parents with non-IEP students that are probably in the same boat. So next week is we're welcoming our teachers to some professional learning, and one of the sessions, or actually a lot of the sessions, two of them specifically, are going to be designed around what instruction looks like in that 90-minute block. The session is going to be focused on how to design a lesson for active engagement. If students need a break due to the length of the session, this could be addressed by a contingency learning plan as well.
Okay, I think that would be really helpful too. We talked about this a little bit when we talked about self-advocacy, and we talked about some of that communication, but we did have several parents who asked, and Sarah, this happened both at elementary and secondary, but I'm going to toss this to you. How will the general education teachers know that a child has special needs, and then what those needs are and what that IEP looks like?
Sure, we build in, all of our case managers, so that primary case manager person that we were just speaking of provides all of those documents, so the IEP document and any supporting documents to the general education teachers, including like a behavior, if the student has a behavior plan or a health plan, medical plan, allergies of some sort, those all of those plans that are specific to that individual student are provided by the caseload manager. And in terms of going over them and making sure that they have that time, we have built-in time in the schedule to collaborate, and so we have suggested that some of that time be used for that kind of collaboration.
Okay. This is a similar question, I guess, at the secondary level then. If a child has multiple teachers, obviously at middle and high school, who would be the main point of contact? This could be Christine or Jessica. If a parent is concerned that a teacher may not know what a child's needs are, who would be the main point of contact for that parent? Yeah,
absolutely. It would be that primary caseload teacher, but then also, like we were talking about, we've got a lot of students that are moving up to different schools right at the time. So we've got students that are moving up to 6th grade. We've got students that are moving up to 9th grade, as well as students that are transitioning up to Troy Center. So we do have department heads at each of our secondary buildings that can help connect you with people on their team. So if you are not sure that who your point person would be, the secondary department head for each building would be a great resource.
Excellent, excellent.
Or you would be a great resource
Yes,
too if they don't know
absolutely.
who that person is. So.
And I always encourage folks too to reach out to those teachers. And if you're not sure who that teacher is, the principal can, and many times, direct you to the person that you need as well. So this is a question that came up a few times, and I'm going to give both, I guess, Sarah and Christine a chance to answer this. We had a parent who said, "I'm concerned that our child will feel like multiple assignments are being heaped up on him at once and become frustrated. Will there be office hours available for additional support? And will parents or students be made aware of what those days and times for extra support would be?"
At the elementary level, we do have some time built in, some intervention time at the end of the day that could be helping with those sorts of things. Our paras could have some time dedicated to that. And we would say, for the student or the parent to reach out to that PCM and discuss that with them. Scheduling that time. And at the secondary, Christine?
Absolutely. So obviously when you're dealing with multiple classes, you really just want to make sure that you're organized. So I would really urge parents to look at their child's Schoology page. There's going to be a lot of information on Schoology, as well as being able to kind of track what they have upcoming. But one of the things, in addition to the embedded support time that we have at the secondary schedule with the 45 minutes at the end of the day, our academic support centers at the high school will be available for students to receive assistance. And so that is every hour there's a resource room teacher as well as a para in that virtual room now.
Okay. And Sarah, we talked a little bit about this when you showed the sample schedules, which I think were really, really helpful. But we had a parent ask, how we will work to weave their child into they're talking about a 3rd grade class, for instance, and how those kind of schedules will be built for students.
Yeah, so what we know is that some of our students with some more complex needs, similar to what I had said, they may not be ready to start their day first thing in the morning in that morning meeting with all of those gen ed students. And so if that's not appropriate for them, they can start their day in a smaller group. We can be very creative in how we start a student's day, as well as how we slowly increase their stamina. And so one thing that we have talked quite a bit about is that many of our students really none of them have had the expectations in which they're going to have starting in the fall. And so recognizing that a student who's in a categorical program, or any student for that matter, may not be ready to be spending a lot of time on a device. And so in particular for our students who find it extremely challenging, looking at how can we start small and build up in increments to increase their stamina and what's appropriate for them, and in a positive way to where they don't end up seeing this sort of learning as an aversive. So we can be really creative with the schedule and really work with that individual student's needs to make sure that it's appropriate for them.
And that answer gives a great segue into our next topic. And I just want to let folks on Facebook know that we will be talking about Schoology, and we will be talking about some of the technology in just a few minutes. But playing off what Sarah just said, that well-being of our students and their social emotional health. Jessica, how are we going to cope with the emotional health of our students? I mean, there's going to be some students who come back to school sad that they're not in their regular school environment. Of course, some will have experienced some trauma. It's traumatic for all of us just to be in this pandemic to begin with. How are we going to cope with those emotional needs of our children?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of students that come back like that. So I think a big piece of that is the work that the teachers will be doing in terms of kind of unpacking. They're really that first contact with the students and recognizing that. And if they're recognizing that a student is struggling or a parent has contacted a building principal or a social worker that they're struggling, then we're going to set up those supports within the building to address the needs of the student. So it might be that we use a one-on-one, conversation with a kid. We could be pulling kids into some small groups, other children that are having very similar concerns into some small groups so that they could process out together what it is that's causing them to feel or act that way, so that we can certainly get them back to a place where they're able to, get that educational benefit in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of kids, one of the big aspects to well-being is that effective interaction with your peers. We know we had a community conversation with some of our high school students earlier this week, and one of the things, of course, they miss the most is that peer interaction. How can we help with effective peer interaction in a virtual setting?
So, person-to-person interaction is obviously best results under face-to-face circumstances, but being in that online environment or a virtual environment is also something that we can accomplish. Opportunities for social and peer interaction can be created. We can also maintain them and even help to facilitate them in a distance learning environment. So I think that we have learned a lot in a little bit of time and have had a lot of conversation around what needs to be done because of what we learned the last 3 months of school. And so we've had a lot of time this summer to think about how that will look different, and peer interactions I think is definitely something that we are all concerned about as we know our children that are coming back would really be rather running around on their playgrounds and giving their teachers hugs to start the day. So that is something that we're working on and continue to work on. And again, we've learned a lot along the way, and we will foster and continue to foster peer interactions.
And I think that sense that we're really trying to build with our entire plan, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or when we're eventually able to return in person, is that community, that classroom community that we are building. And I think that that's going to be critically important here too. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to technology because we had a lot of questions regarding technology. And if you're joining us on Facebook, our topic in this community conversation is special education. I do want to clarify one thing, and I think Dr. Macheski, I'll bring you in. There was a little bit of confusion earlier this week about devices and some folks thinking that there might be a shortage of devices when in fact that's not really the case. Do you want to clarify that, Rich?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks for including me back in the conversation.
Sorry.
That's all right. We have a fabulous team. I mean, this special education team is really awesome. They know their stuff, and they've been working diligently to provide answers. It's been a challenge, we know that, but it's a challenge that they're up to. So we appreciate their hard work. And I don't think it can be underscored as well the importance of the last comment, which is creating the community. That's exactly why we set our plan up the way we did. We didn't separate out, for instance, a virtual platform. We want everybody to be a part from the start of the school year in their classroom community, because it is our expectation as quickly as possible that we bring students back into those families that wish to, at least, that we bring students back in to face-to-face instruction as quickly as possible. And so that remains our commitment. But I'm glad that you all said that, and I want to make sure that I reiterate that. So with respect to technology, a huge shout out to our Board of Education and Dr. Wilson as part of the board, as representing the board this evening. The thought to make sure that we were going to cover all of our students with respect from a one-to-one standpoint was really important. We did it early enough. We thought we had done it early enough. The reality is, given the challenges around the pandemic and the shutdowns that had occurred, supply chains were significantly impacted. Now that said, we have all of our devices in the district at this point. So all of the iPads themselves have been delivered. The challenge that we had was that the cases for the new iPads had been delayed. Great news is that, and we can't hand out those iPads without the cases. They're too easily damaged. So that said, the good news is that those cases have begun to come in. And so our technology department over at TRC has done a fabulous job ramping up. We've got students working with us, helping to unbox, get those iPads set up, get them in their cases, and so forth. So, and we're going to be handing out a couple thousand, or our goal is to hand out several hundred on a given day. And so that's going to be a challenge that we're up to. So good news is everyone will have a device to start the year. That is our goal, is to make sure everybody has a device to start the year. It may be, though, that the device you have is not the device that you will have for the remainder of the year until we catch up. So we're committed to making sure that everybody has a device to get started. And then if we have to swap out devices, if you're, for instance, one of those that's going to be getting a new device, then at some point early on in the fall, we'll be contacting you. TRC will be contacting you, and we'll be arranging to swap those out. So good news is they're here. The bad news is they're going to be delayed somewhat, but the other good news is that we're going to make sure that everyone is covered moving forward. So
okay, and thank you so much. It's important to clarify that, I think. And the purpose of that email that was sent out too was, as Dr. Macheski said, there are some of the covers to the iPads that may come in during that second week of school. And the purpose of that was just to find out who didn't have a device they could use at home, which students didn't have a device, and then they were just to click on that link and fill out that form, and then we would get you what we're calling kind of those loaner devices until the final covers come in. So you don't need to do anything with that form unless your child doesn't have a device already at home to use just for those first couple of weeks. But getting back to specifically to special education, and we had several questions regarding assistive technology. And Christine, maybe we'll start with you. When and then what will students with IEPs receive as it relates to technology?
Well, just like Rich said, all students will receive a school-issued device. Now, if every IEP team always considers or determines if assistive technology is needed. And so if technology, in addition to what the district is providing, is needed, it would be determined by that team meeting. And then trainings or any type of tech support could be facilitated by our AT consultant, Robin McLeish, or the primary caseload teacher. Okay.
Excellent. So Jessica, I think that training is such an important question. We have parents on Facebook, and I know we had parents in the who submitted questions about training, specifically on Schoology. Our elementary parents are not as familiar with Schoology. Will we be providing training for parents on the new technology? Oh, Jess, you're muted again. Let me unmute you. Okay, you're good.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, the district is going to be providing technology or training for all of the parents on Schoology. But one thing that I want to make sure that parents understand is we'll send this resource out tomorrow as it relates to assistive technology. We do have an assistive technology coordinator and a consultant that will also provide trainings. So we're going to do some parent trainings that will help you to see some of the accessibility features that are also part of an iPad that you may or may not be aware of that your child can benefit from. And also, if there is a piece of specific assistive technology that your child is using, we can always set up training as well with Robin McLeish, our assistive technology coordinator.
I think as you know, parents work and help their children through in a virtual world, I think that kind of training is so important. So if there are folks that are watching us on Facebook who don't necessarily have a child who receives special education services, I wanted you to point out what Jessica said in the beginning. The district will be providing parent training and parent education for all parents in regards to Schoology and some of the other tech tools that we'll be using. And then the special education department, as she said, is also ready to provide some specific things to parents of children with special needs too. And I know as a parent, I appreciate that, because then that way I feel as if I'm in the loop and I know where to look for anything from assignments to progress to see how my child is doing. So I think that will go a long way as well. And that kind of segues into our questions about evaluations. And I'm going to talk about evaluations in a couple of different ways, because I lumped some of these together. But Jessica, staying with you, we had a parent who said that their child was due for a reevaluation in the spring. And when can they expect that evaluation to take place, and how would it take place?
So in the spring, our evaluation cycle, unfortunately, was shut down due to the fact that we were in, phase 3. So we did, a lot of our psychologists and our case managers reached out to parents and let them know that, evaluations would not be able to be completed at this particular time. And they still worked through what that evaluation would look like and need. So we do have we have many of those already set. And if they aren't already set, your psychologist or your primary case manager will be reaching out to you within the first week of school to let you know when that is. But for the most part, dates had already been set at that particular time for meetings to occur as well. So we're really working through what that evaluation process looks like in this remote setting. And so working also with Oakland schools and just making sure that we're able to do a comprehensive evaluation as well.
All right, thank you. The next question isn't truly an evaluation in the same sense that we've just been talking about, but I think parents are always interested to know on how we're going to be monitoring how things are going for their children. And Christine, maybe I'll throw this one to you. How will students' goals be worked on remotely in a remote setting?
So, very similar to the brick and mortar setting, if the service provider, whether it be as a speech or a special education teacher or OT, sometimes we have joint goals where there's multiple people helping support that student on that goal. So they will be working on those remotely, and they will set up a scheduled time to work with those students, either individually or small group, to address those goals.
Okay, and I guess progress monitoring would be in a similar fashion. How will that take place?
Yeah, so progress monitoring is something that we are really, we're trying to, think smarter rather than harder, and we're really trying to utilize the resources that we have available, especially in neighboring districts. So myself, Jessica, Sarah, we have been engaging in conversations with other districts in our area to figure out ways that they're using, what tools they're using to progress monitor students, so then also looking at formative assessments to monitor their progress as well.
Okay, and I know Dr. Machewski touched on some of this next category. We're talking about kind of ancillary services, and Dr. Machewski talked about this a little bit in the beginning as well. And I don't know, Rich, if you want to join back in the conversation, but Sarah, since you shared some of the schedules, can you talk to me about what the schedule for therapy will be for students with special education?
Sure. In terms of all of those ancillary services and what the schedule looks like and what the format is of that service, it would really be discussed during that contingency learning plan meeting that you'll have, that families will have with their teams. And it would be scheduled within the school day, so it wouldn't be something that we would be doing outside of the school day. That's within that schedule. And just knowing for our families that creating those consistent schedules is just one of our top priorities. If you go back to the schedules, we did have that intervention time built into the day. And so ideally, it would be great if we could continue to schedule those services during those intervention blocks.
Excellent. And I'll remind parents and others watching that this is being recorded, so they'll be able to go back and take a look at what some of those things will look like. what about things like, and Jessica or Christine, how about social work and speech services provided to high school students in the current working environment that we have? If we're in a virtual environment, how will those be provided?
Providing our social work and speech services will be done remotely while we're in the remote setting. Really kind of, again, leaning on that contingency learning plan when we're in the remote setting, and then also thinking about when we return to the hybrid setting, did remote work for your child? Because if it worked and you don't want them to be pulled from a particular class, that may be something to consider in using of that remote on their non-cohort day. So that also, you know, we can get creative with that when we're back face to face too, and looking at what some of those services look like. So when I would say that they can be offered both remote and in person when we are in the hybrid as well.
And Sarah, what about services from Oakland schools, such as hearing impaired services, visually impaired services? How will those be provided during this time?
Those services will continue to be provided, whether we're remote or back in person. So if we're remote, they will do it remotely. Once we get back into the schools, they did send us some information to let us know that they will be, those two areas, HI and VI, those consultants will continue to be providing in-person consultation at that time once we go back into the buildings, and they'll just make sure that they have appropriate PPE and they follow all of our procedures that we have in place for that. So.
Okay, and we're a little bit over the time, but we're committed to getting through the questions that we got. And I'm going to use something that Sarah just said to kind of transition a little bit. We had a few questions regarding the when we come back into a hybrid setting, and Dr. Macheski talked in the beginning about our goals and our time frame and what we're looking to do. But Jessica, in terms of when we are back in that hybrid setting, we had a parent who asked, could middle school students with IEPs be allowed to meet in groups, maybe in the gym or the cafeteria or somewhere like that, away from other students during their 90-minute general ed block sessions?
So when I think about that question, I wonder if it is because of the fact that they need less distraction. And so if that is the premise of the question, I would say that we would have accommodations in place where the student could work away from their peers. In terms of getting large groups of kiddos together, that we still have to follow the social distancing guidelines. We could certainly use the gymnasium to be able to have some of those, larger groups of kids together if needed, but that's not.
Yeah, we're still under the same requirements we would be
under
in a hybrid setting regardless, I think. This is an interesting question. We also, and Jessica, maybe I'll stick with you on this. Would it be possible that when school does return to a hybrid or possible in-person learning, could students who receive special services like speech or perhaps some special instruction come to school for those services, but stay at home for the rest of their virtual learning, if that's something that a parent was interested in?
Again, I think that's something that really goes through that learning plan where we're talking about, what that student needs. And if face-to-face is what that particular child needs, then that would be, certainly we can do that. Like I said, speech and social work, for the most part, I shouldn't say for everybody, because it's not, but there are a group of children in which speech and social work can be done remotely, and that works okay. There are a group of children in which face-to-face is most appropriate and where they get their benefit.
That's why we have individualized plans, right? So let me ask you about when we return to that hybrid, and we're talking specifically about speech, because I think this is just kind of a logistical question. And for a lot of parents, how will that work when students and staff are wearing masks? How will we be able to do speech services in that way?
So we have ordered masks for our staff that are see-through so that the children are able to see their speech pathologist model for them. In terms of our students that are working on articulation goals, we will need to have the same type of mask for them as they're working through that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because students would have to see, and as well, staff would have to see what students are doing too. I think that's so important. We covered a lot of topics here tonight, and Dr. Machewski, I'm going to give it to you in just a minute, just to kind of wrap up, because we're about 15 minutes or so over, but no worries there. Dr. Wilson, I just wanted to give you a moment though first. I know you've been patiently here just to support the team, and not necessarily here to answer any questions, but we do so appreciate that, because I think it's important for our parents to know that the Board of Education is equally invested in these topics and is listening and supporting as well. So if there's anything that you'd like to say, feel free.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I just, as a board member, we know that when we heard all of the Return to Learn plan, there was a lot of feedback about special education, and we just want to make sure that we know that you as parents know how much we care about this population of students as well. And I am just really grateful to Jessica, Sarah, and Christine and the way that their team is putting all of this thought into it. And so just as a parent, I appreciate all of the work that these teams put together, and as a board member, I appreciate it. And so I just wanted to be here tonight to show that, and also for the community to know that the board is aware of how important this work is, and that we see this as a key component of the Return to Learn plan. So thank you.
Thank you. We definitely appreciate that. And Dr. Machewski, I know we covered a lot of topics tonight, from just some very practical things to some kind of big picture issues. And I was wondering if there's anything that you wanted to say to kind of wrap us up.
Well, I guess and thank you, Carrie, for leading us through the conversation. You're so good at this. You do make it look effortless, because I know below the screen you're handling a bunch of things with your fingers. You're texting and you're emailing and you're watching Facebook and everything else. So you're really fabulous at this. Just to echo what Dr. Wilson said, our board, as they should, has been very responsive to our community and questions and concerns that have been brought our way. And we're thankful that when we talk about One Troy in the Troy School District, it's not just something you see on Twitter. It's not just something that you see on our letterhead. It's something that we truly believe in. And if we're going to meet our mission of ensuring learning for all, it means that we have to make sure that we're taking great care to address the issues of our students, all of our student groups, and in particular our group of exceptional learners that we've had a chance to talk about here tonight. So I just want to thank everyone for their patience, for being on the call. The other thing I would say is, I know that I continue to get some feedback from folks. Well, hey, why does it take so long to do this, or why it takes so long to do this? And I want everybody to know that that's part of what I challenged our team. What we told our team, that we're not interested in being first out of the gate with information. We need to make sure that we take our time and that we do this right, because our community expects us to do this right. Our community expects us to get it right the first time. And when we're dealing with our special education students, when we're dealing with our ELD students, it doesn't matter. We need to make sure that we're thoughtful. So I can assure our community this evening that Jessica and Christine and Sarah have been thoughtful through this process. We're going to get it right, because these are the children of members of our community that we're dealing with, and that's the most important thing that we can do, is put our heads to this process and make sure that we do it right. So if things have seemed a little slow, I want you to understand it's not for lack of starting early. It's for lack of it is for the purpose that we really put time and energy into this work. And I believe strongly that it will pay off. It'll pay off as we start the year in our virtual setting, but it's going to also pay off as we look at opportunities to work with students moving forward, to to move towards whether it's our transition or hybrid plan, or getting students back in seat at 100% at some point in time this year. Know that we're committed to doing it right, and again, there can be nothing more important than that. So I'll leave it at that. I want to thank everyone again for tuning in this evening. I know probably some have been on all of our community conversations. I hope you find this valuable, certainly as valuable as I find it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Machewski, and thank you to Christine and Sarah and Nicole and Jessica. I think it's been a really good conversation. Some of the things that Rich just talked about in terms of the amount of work that's gone in that necessarily you don't see behind the scenes. My team is going to begin to try to share some of that work with you, so you can see kind of the thoughtfulness that went into many of these decisions. We're also, our technology team, as Jessica mentioned several times, we're going to give some training sessions for parents. So this is not the end of these conversations going forward. We've got a lot to share with you. And as I said from the beginning, this is recorded. It will live on Facebook as a video if you missed the beginning and want to go back and look again. And I will also be sending out a link to this conversation to our parents of students with IEPs or 504, so that you can watch it. It'll be on our Vimeo, our public Vimeo page for anybody to see. And we just encourage you to keep with us on these conversations. And as Dr. Machewski said, we are one Troy. We're in this together. So good night, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, all.
Bye.